Hello, this is Lawrence Lewis.
And this is Sister Christian.
Today is Friday, May 1st. It's Friday, Christian.
Mayday, Mayday.
This is the Producers Happy Hour, a podcast with two producers on opposite coasts, reaching out to our filmmaking and live event community to hear your stories about how the pandemic has affected you, your life, and your work.
Your stories let us know that we're not alone. It's important for us to keep sharing our experiences, our ideas, our creativity. It helps us understand that we're not alone in all of this.
So email us, or better yet, record a 1 to 2 minute voice memo and send it to us at producershappyhour@gmail.com. Just follow the instructions on our website, producershappyhour.com.
And please share this show with everybody you know, your entire universe. Just blast us out there, because we understand that these stories, again, they help us, but they help people who aren't in our community as well. They're human stories, and we think that's important.
Yes, and if you rate us on Apple Podcasts, it helps the algorithms, and we all need help with the algorithms.
Love us.
So, Christian, today we're chatting with the lovely Annie Saunders, who is an amazing director and live artist. She works mostly in immersive theater, branded experiential, and she is repped as an experiential director at HeLo.
What a lovely, lovely woman she is. Again, I just love these interviews. I mean, she's amazing.
The projects she's done are very impactful. Mm-hmm. They're very emotional. Mm-hmm. Again, it's like Yehuda. There's such a tone of human connection that comes out of her work. It just oozes out of her work. It's interesting to be that kind of artist in a time like this when you can't have that human connection in the way that we think about it in terms of physicality and touch and closeness, right?
I know. Her work is palpable. Like your emotions are, you could touch your emotions. She's amazing.
Yeah. So, Christian, it's Friday.
Yeah.
This is believe it or not, this is the end of week 7.
Oh, I believe it. I do, because I've definitely got into a routine of house.
Well, and this show has helped routine-wise for me.
For sure.
How are you doing? First, how's your cat? And how are you doing? How's Sid?
I know I was pretty emotional yesterday, guys, I have to say.
It's okay.
So Sid came home last night with a bucket full of medication to give him. He is on anti-nausea medication and a appetite stimulant. And while we're waiting, because he got an ultrasound, he got so much shit. Ultrasound, all kinds of stuff, and blood work and everything. And I'm expecting the results today, but I have to say, within the last hour or so, seems to be a little bit perkier than he's been.
Oh,
I know.
good.
So we're just all going to cross our fingers and think that, he's on the mend. We'll see. So that's very exciting. And another update, I received my test results back, which were negative for antibodies.
Really?
I know.
Okay.
So weird.
Now, here's a question that I wanted to ask you, and I didn't want to pose it before you got the results.
Yeah.
Now that you have the results, were you hoping that it was going to be positive?
Yes, absolutely. I was absolutely hoping it was positive. And I also understand that, with the Abbott test, nothing's perfect right now. All these tests have been rushed to market, as they say.
Yeah, and there is still a 10%? 15% false positives,
negative, and false positive.
And false positives.
Yeah, which is interesting. So I was hoping that I was, because of the theory that we discussed that I, came up with in the common sense realm of world without my medical degree. If I've had it before, that means I was asymptomatic, or I was very light, it was lightly affected. So if I, in theory, got it again, it would be the same way. However, the viral load that we've been discussing in the last few days about how, the higher the viral load that you're exposed to, the harder the virus affects you, is there too. So in theory, if you are asymptomatic, it's because you weren't exposed to a high viral load.
Yeah.
So, it would have been false comfort, I feel, if I was positive.
Interesting. Okay.
And so
I see that.
Turns out I've either been doing a very good job or was extremely lucky. And how
or both. It's a little bit of both. This isn't like some cheesy old saying about luck. Luck is the intersection of preparedness and timing, right? So it's not luck. It's that you were doing the right thing. You were washing your hands, and for the times that you maybe lapsed, the timing worked out.
Right. No, I agree with that. But I also was flying all over. And then before March 13th, I would say.
Yeah.
Not sure how much I was caring.
Hey, that's the truth.
I mean, I would think that we're correcting, years and years of behavior.
Bad behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. So those things are good. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. In honor of the original concept of the show, Producers Happy Hour, I am having a lovely IPA.
Lovely.
Today, a Lagunitas IPA.
Nice.
Bringing back the cocktails, even though it's a little early over here, but hey.
Nah.
It's quarantine times.
It's daytime.
Christian, it's May 1st, it's May Day, and as you know, we've discussed before we started recording, a lot of the workers at places like Amazon, Whole Foods, Instacart, they've organized a historic, massive strike.
Yeah.
So it's a series of work stoppages all across the country, sick-outs and protests. It's all culminating today, and it's organized by the frontline workers of some of the country's largest corporations. Target as well, FedEx, they're all walking off the job today. They say all. I don't know how many. I haven't seen any actual news reports of what's happening out there.
Right.
But it's interesting. I mean, the amount of protection they get is not enough. The amount of pay they're getting is not enough. And so they've realized they have the power.
Yep.
They have some demands that need to be met.
I agree with them.
Very smart.
Yeah. As we've said many times, they're allowing us to stay home.
Yeah. We're sitting here recording this podcast because they're out there providing us.
I just happened to have received an Amazon delivery. So, I mean, I just think that they're allowing us to stay home and they're actually taking the risk for us. Listen, they need to be taken care of.
Man, everything's shifted.
Everything is shifted.
I hope we remember this. Like you said a couple episodes ago, I hope it's not all for naught, right? We come out of here with some bigger learnings about what is important to us.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
what
God
you got,
willing
Christian?
And all that. I saw some stuff, from Adweek where TV ad sale executives worry about the biggest, like revenue losses. They're thinking about now, how do they get the 30 million people who are out of jobs, because that came out Thursday. How do they get their money? Like, how do you advertise to 30 million people who don't have jobs?
Yeah.
Rent is due today. Very few people have been paid their unemployment benefits. I still haven't seen any unemployment benefits or, the stimulus check, quote unquote, from the government, or heard anything back from the PPP, EIDL,
LMNOP.
Exactly. I haven't seen a penny from anybody. So how would they advertise to me? Of course, the ad sales are losing.
Sales are down.
And then there's no sports is a huge, televised sports. Huge for advertising. There's none going on right now. So there's nowhere to advertise when it comes to live sports. Yeah, it's just a snowball. All of this has been snowballing, and we're still finding out what sectors of the economy are being affected as we go.
I read in the Freelancers Union blog.
Oh, right.
They did their own poll. And so granted, the poll is a small sample size, so take it with a grain of salt. But they polled 2,767 freelance union members.
Right.
And they answered their surveys about their struggles with, all these systems, the LMNOP systems we just talked about. 84% of freelancers who have applied for some kind of government relief have not received any money.
Right.
And almost all of them, 86%, have applied for at least one of PUA, PPP, EIDL, or the Self-Employment Assistance Program. It's a small sample, so, there's probably a hefty margin of error. But, there's a lot of people out there that are not being able to access these funds.
Yeah, and you can't get a hold of anybody. Nobody's responding to your... Yeah, it's just... it's very frustrating because, again, I have savings. I'm using it. I had a good last year and the beginning of this year, so that's great. But I mean, what happens when? I might be one of those desperate people who take a job, remotely because I need to. Yeah.
To that point, another article that our good friend Sandrine Orabona sent us, the documentary filmmaker we had on a show.
Sandrine.
She sent us this article from Johns Hopkins about grappling with the ethics of social distancing. And they're talking, of course, on a grand scale.
Right.
But it applies so much if we look at the microcosm of our film set and what that means. And so this document, I'll put it in the show notes. You can Google it. It's called Grappling with the Ethics of Social Distancing. It talks about all the ethical questions behind the different measures and how to weigh those ethics. It's kind of walking you through the process of weighing the ethics of what is right, what isn't right, and how do we move forward since there is no vaccine. And I think one of the most interesting things about it is, given the many policy choices that have already been made, there is a lack of consensus regarding who bears the burden of proof for showing that a policy is justifiable.
On your honor.
So you can't really prove a negative, right? Because we stopped being around each other, this thing didn't happen. But there's no way to prove that was a result of us. You know what I mean? So
I'm seeing a lot of that recently too. It's like, well, see, it wasn't that bad. So we can get back out there. But the reason why, in theory, it wasn't that bad is because we're doing this.
Right.
You know, we received the Florida guidelines today from Chris W. Keygrip.
Yeah.
We received those too. So I think that people are just going to rush ahead and see what happens and then learn. They need proof. And so since we don't have, since we're not giving proof, that we're going to show them by opening up.
Yeah.
If they open up and everything goes great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I really hope for that. I'm scared because I am Southern that things happen in the South to a relative or something because of these policies or to, you know, production communities that was avoidable, but everything is avoidable in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
So again, ethics. Yeah. Great article.
Ethics.
Thanks,
I'll put that in the show note. We always put all these articles in the show notes so you can check them out. On our website, producershappyhour.com, there is a page called Take Action with a list of a lot of resources, a lot of information, and opportunities for you to volunteer and donate and help other people. So,
Lawrence, I'm just going to side note and say I just got an email on Seamless from Sweet Green pushing all their new dishes.
Oh, really?
It makes me miss LA. A little bit. I love New York, don't get me wrong, everyone. But the food in LA can be very healthy bougie.
Healthy bougie.
And it's nice. So I don't think we've ordered out, by the way, in at least a month now.
Oh, really?
Which is saving money, absolutely, cooking and stuff. But it's just also like, it's a different way of living in New York.
Yeah,
usually order everything out.
Yeah, that's just what you do. Yeah.
Now that I've got everyone's mouth all ready for the delicious sweet greens, let's get on with the interview.
Yeah, she's a little delicious sweet green as well. And we're going to chat with her, Annie Saunders. She is a director and a live artist. Her company, Wilderness, has presented The Day Shall Declare It, which was an amazing immersive play that took place in a disused warehouse in downtown Los Angeles' Art District, with Los Angeles Performance Practice, and in London with Theatre Delicatessen in the former BBB Studios and the Bush Theatre. Her company has also presented work at the Public Theaters, Under the Radar Festival, Red Cat, the 14th Factory, the Broad Stage, the San Francisco Playhouse, and Getty Villa.
She holds an MA in Literature and Critical Studies from the University of London and trained at the Sanford Meisner Center for the Arts, the American Conservatory Theatre, and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. She worked for 10 years as a creative activist with Eve Ensler's V-Day, and she is currently represented for commercial projects and commissions by HeLo, and has created unique, large-scale experiences at Cannes Lions for MasterCard, Santander, Hewlett-Packard, Dos Equis, Bullet, and ASICS worldwide. Jeez, she is amazing.
It's a long list of credits.
Yes.
Let's take a listen.
Annie, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to check in on you, see how you're doing, how your family's doing. Are you in LA?
Yeah, I'm in LA. I'm good. I'm pretty, I'm healthy. My family's healthy. Everyone's okay. So that's the important thing,
Yeah, for sure. So we read a little intro to you, so we know kind of your background and what you do as an artist.
Great.
What was happening to you? Take us up to the days leading up to the pandemic. Were you working on something? Did you have projects in the works? What was your mind frame before things really started to become an emergency?
Yeah, so I was working in London in March, where I have a couple of projects, one that I was working on in particular. And we had a residency up until like March 9th, that first week of March, and a little bit into the following week. So we were kind of working in the studio, just myself and one other collaborator, sometimes two, as things were sort of shutting down. So that was really interesting. Just started to become, sort of hyper aware of like riding the train and things starting to close and people trying to go and see stuff before everything shut. I had a couple experiences of going to the theater in those last like weeks I really felt like, I wonder how long it will be before I do this again. Here we are sitting together. Like, I wonder if we just won't do this anymore for a while, So that was interesting. The last thing I saw was a 7-hour show at the National by Robert Lepage.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, yeah, it was really interesting to do that kind of on the 9th of March at the end of, I think the National closed like maybe 3 days later.
Yes. And did you fly home just in time?
Yeah, so I was sort of deliberating. So I spent a lot of time in the UK. I used to live there full time, and I'm a British citizen, and I deliberated about staying actually quite a bit. Then in the end, it was like my flight was canceled. They bumped me up to a flight the following day. There was a lot of uncertainty about like if I stayed, how really long that would be.
Right.
And, in LA, my studio is here, all my stuff is here, all my hard drives are here. Like if I have to hunker down and like
something,
try to do, like extensive projects, it's better for me to be here. So yeah, I flew on March 19th, which was the day that, like when I was on the plane, the order from Gavin Newsom came down to stay home. So
just in the nick of time.
Yeah, so I've been home since then. I mean, people are still flying, but yeah. And I had, various projects in the works on a number of different timelines. So, the stuff that was touring soon, like in May and in the summer, is postponed. Either like some things that were part of festivals have been postponed, and the festival is just doing itself next year. They're just moving the program from 2020 to 2021. That's stuff like we were going to do HeLo, which is a big outdoor show in a tank of water, which is a piece I perform in. The author is Lars Jan, who's a frequent collaborator of mine. So which is a show that I love doing and have been part of since it was created. And it's a big piece of public art for large groups in a public square, sort of unlimited number, thousands of people. That was meant to be at the end of May. That was postponed until next year. I have a site-specific show that was meant to open later, toward the end of this year, in the late autumn, that was supposed to be starting rehearsal in July. That's been indefinitely postponed. As with much of my work involves a property developer and a number of investors and city organizations and permitting, and it's a complex situation. So that's the one I would say that's the most uncertain. And then I have another project with Wild Up, who are a experimental orchestra here in town, and an Irish composer, which is a project that has become really kind of bitingly relevant at the moment. It's called Rest, and it's a project about sensory deprivation and hallucinations and the nature of consciousness and what rest means to us in the modern world.
Yeah, that's right.
And we've been working on that for a while. Yeah, did I mention that to you before?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you about, because your work is so based on human connection and human interaction. Your work is interactive or experiential, so it must be quite, I don't know, you tell me, like seeing how things were unfolding and kind of once you start to get the bigger picture of the impact this was going to have on what you do as an artist. How did you respond to that?
Yeah, it's so interesting, man. I mean, I guess I'll say first of all that I think I was so thrilled that you asked me to have this conversation, and I, immediately was like, yes, I want to do it. And I'm so excited to be part of the conversation and to be having this discourse about what people are thinking and feeling. And at the same time, it does feel like we're in free fall, and it's hard to have a take,
Yeah.
I read the headlines every day, and a lot of it just feels like sort of filtering for relevant information. Like, has anything changed? Do I need to do anything? And then there's like a sea of op-eds, right? So it's like fundamentally, as an artist and as a live artist, I'm looking. All I want is to be able to participate in a meaningful way in the world. I mean, that's what I want. So being asked to talk about this stuff is really meaningful and really exciting. And at the same time, I feel like it's also important I think, to note that like, we're not in a place where an articulate opinion or like a take is really formulable, if that's a word, There was a beautiful interview with the author George Saunders that really spoke to me. So there's been a couple of pieces on the internet that I've returned to again and again. And one was this interview where he says basically like, we need to keep our sensory apparatus as open as possible so that we don't miss any data, because it's going to be our job to describe this in the future. But it's really hard to keep your apparatus open when you're really fearful and anxious and distracted. And also it's like the moment where you slip on the ice and you can't really suspend time in that moment and have a take, like this is what I think about the fact that I just slipped and I'm about to fall. It's like this, we're in this kind of suspended split second of like, what's it going to be like? At the same time, I think that, I was saying to someone yesterday, like, I love to make work for small groups of people.
Right.
I love to make work for one audience member at a time, 10, 20, 25, 50 audience at a time. I love that kind of intimate work.
Yeah.
It's often financially impossible or challenging.
Challenging.
sometimes prohibitively challenging.
Yeah. I've been doing a show that allows one audience member through at a time. Doing that show for 7 years, I can guarantee you it's financially impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, let's say this. I would frame it a slightly different way, which is that it requires a new model. Right?
Yeah,
it requires a new model. Yeah. And I think for years we've been trying to find a model that works for intimate audience sizes and for the creation of personal experiences that doesn't require a $1,500 ticket price, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we've been trying as the makers of the work to also be the architects of a new producing system. And gosh, I mean, 100%. If this time allows us the opportunity to do that less sort of as we are on the fly and as we're making, then I think that would be amazing.
So we know that you also do branded experiential projects. Yeah. Of course, all of that stuff is on hold for a little while, but have you had any conversations with ad agencies or brands on how to pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of agencies are pivoting to things that they're already doing that are online. A lot of experiential agencies that I work with are focusing on the client projects that are new websites that are interactive or things like that. There has been some discussion of shooting stuff socially distanced, which is interesting. And I'll be interested to see where that goes. Very interested in audio, whether it's in a curated environment or at home. So I've been talking with creative agencies and people who are pivoting about that, about audio experiences and also about animation. I mean, that's what I want to talk about. Sometimes they want to talk about VR or other stuff, and that's fine too. Like I'm very willing to test I'm interested in my own resistances and how they can be made more malleable. There was a beautiful thing that came out online recently. This wonderful artist who I love, who's Lawrence Abu Hamdan, who's a filmmaker and an audio artist, and he has been looking for ways to release his work online in a way that feels meaningful and specific to him and also translatable, because I think this is the other big piece of material that we're working with in this moment is framing things as either replaceable or not replaceable. Like, is it a replacement for going to the Metropolitan Opera to watch a performance of the Metropolitan Opera on your laptop in your bed? I would say no, because it's not all about the content. The experience is part of it. So he's been looking for ways to make, I would say, rather than replace, like translate things that we've made for another medium, right? Exactly. Translation is better than replacement. He made a piece of audio, which is a 12-minute experience for audience members in a gallery space that's blacked out. It's a darkened room with a 12-minute audio track on a speaker array. So what he did was he eventually put it online, redesigned it for headphones.
Oh, wow.
And there are instructions, like there's guidance, and the guidance is turn all the lights off, get your best quality headphones. Right. And if you try to navigate away from the page or you open a new tab while you're listening to this thing, it will stop.
Nice.
And I really responded to that because I was like, oh, I really want to do it now. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I want to do it because there's a space for me as an audience member to participate. It's interactive now because there's something for me to do. And I want to do it right. I want to do it the way he wants it to be done. And I feel like I have a job and a role, and it feels like an interactive participatory experience just because there's a guidance there.
That's interesting. It's so great to chat with you about this because you're putting into words something that I've been bouncing around in my head about, we have the show, The Alone Experience, and why don't we just do a Zoom alone experience? And I was like, that just, it doesn't feel like we're creating something new. Like to your point, it's replacing what we can't do with something else that will soon be irrelevant once we can do that thing again. So I'd rather try and figure out a new way, a different way of telling the stories that we explore in our show. So, we talk a lot about the logistics of how do we go back to doing what we do on this show, and that's all well and good, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But and I'm hearing you talk about the new things that you're interested in, working with tools as an artist to do what you do. But what about, do you think this experience, this emergency, this pandemic is affecting you in the stories you want to tell? Is it going to affect you as an artist? Do you see things differently now that will embed itself into your work?
No doubt. I would say it's too soon for me to know how. And I also feel like often my experience has been that I don't know why I'm making something until like years afterwards. I've made everything I've made. Years later, I've kind of gone, oh, yeah. Oh,
that's what was happening.
Okay. I was really interested in this and I had no idea. So I think I won't know until later. And that was the other beautiful thing about that interview with George Saunders, and basically him saying, take notes, take bad. And this is my interpretation. He didn't say this, but my interpretation is take bad notes, take bad, haphazard, nonsensical, disorganized notes, because you don't know what is going to be relevant or useful until later. The most mundane kind of thing might unfold into something. So I think for sure it will affect the type of stories that I want to tell and the way I want to tell them. It's also reframing the work that I'm already making, right? Like what I've been talking with Emma, the O'Halloran, the composer for Rest, is it's really interesting because we have this body of recordings of interviews and research that we did before. And then we have the things that we're talking to people about now, in terms of what rest means to them in the modern era, and sensory overwhelm, sensory deprivation, dopamine fasting, all these different things that are going on, all these phenomena. But we've crossed a line with that subject matter. The recordings from before are from a different world, right? And what we've been talking about is this show it's going to be about this now. We don't even have to make it about this or point. It just will be. People, that's what's going to be coming up for people. So what do we do with that knowledge? We know that the audience are going to be receiving what we bring them with a framework of having experienced it. So how do we respond to that,
Yeah, I feel that just watching TV shows. Somebody coughs or shakes hands, and
or
it's
touching.
just this feels all wrong now.
Ooh.
Totally. I was saying to someone the other day, we were talking about one of the things that we made, one of the concepts that I created for the home was this space that was a museum where there were objects that were just everyday objects that had taken on sort of totemic archaeological significance because of what they represented in these women's stories, like keys and phones and wallets and objects that we don't think of as weapons, but could be weapons like a remote control. Any small object that can be hurled, etc., were displayed as artifacts or artwork or things that had taken on this kind of archaeological significance is the word that I'm deciding to use right now.
It's good. I like it.
And the same is happening now, right? Masks and gloves and, the idea that I'm wearing a mask. 6 months ago, if I said that to you, you would think oh, you're wearing a costume. Right. Doesn't mean that anymore.
No.
And I think those are the type of things that I feel like it's our job to notice without necessarily knowing how that's going to become part of the work. But it's like, just put a pin in, like take a note.
Yeah. Take a note on that.
We've been discussing with people too, like once we're able to continue on with our work, safety.
Yeah.
And what we feel is, or boundaries, what we feel we're going to need to be able to go back to work within ourselves or require of, the trust that we may or may not have. I mean, we trust that people are close to us, but maybe not 2 circles away. I think maybe a better question for you would be, are there any larger ideological changes that you hope to see in the industry just as a result of all of this?
I think it's so interesting, and it makes me feel kind of proud of like the immersive community, because I think that people who've been making intimate shows where audience are interacting either with performers or with the space or whatever have been thinking a lot about safety for a long time.
Yes.
Have been thinking about performer safety, audience safety, have been experimenting with incredibly complicated sort of waivers and things for people to sign, or like instructions or signage, or like how much do we tell them to maintain some mystery and intrigue, but we keep them safe. And man, like we've been thinking about that stuff for so long.
Yes.
100%. I've been thinking about that stuff for so long. I mean, I remember somebody, a commission I had last year, there was a question about actors serving food to the audience. And I was like, there are types of food that I would take from an actor, and there are types of, there was a question about like oysters. And I was like, I'm not taking an oyster from somebody who's pretending to be somebody else. Like if you, there are really, but a strawberry I would take. And it's like, it's on me as the creator to find a way, which is so challenging, to articulate why. The difference between and why it's important for people who are giving us information about the safety of our body or about how we're supposed to act are not like wearing a top hat and being weird, like that person has to be real and relatable. So there's all these layers and intricacies to keeping the audience safe. And I think that the immersive community, interactive theater makers, intimate theater makers, participatory performance makers, experiential creators have been thinking about that so much for so long and experimenting with that, I would say, in ways that some have worked, some have not worked, some have been alienating, some have been overkill, all these kinds of things. Some have been not enough and audience have not felt safe, but the safety of the audience member and their ability to feel held and cared for and safe to submit themselves to the experience, and that the people who made this thing that they're entering are going to take care of them and be responsible has been something that I think has been our domain in many ways. And so I think for me, it's built in to how I make shows. With the home, for example, it was like you put the headphones on, you interact with various people before you get into what feels like the art part.
The show.
Right?
Yeah.
And you put on headphones and there's a recording saying, I'm the stage manager. This is what you do if you want to leave. If you want to leave the experience, take your headphones off. We'll see you and we'll come and get you, which does 3 jobs at once, right? It tells them that we can see them, that they're under surveillance, which is part of the storytelling, it's part of the content, that these women felt like people were watching them all the time.
Interesting.
It also tells them that if they take their headphones off, they're going to have to leave. So if they want to be like sneaky and be like, oh, I wonder if I take my headphones off, if I'll be able to hear anything, or if they want to like do something that I would be worried would drop them out of the experience, they know that there's going to be like a consequence for that, so to speak, or boundary. And then they also, most importantly, have a really clear way of like, I'm feeling triggered or I want to get out of here for whatever reason. Yeah. All I have to do is do a really clear physical action. It's also a gift to our stage manager because it's a really clear thing and it only means one thing. She doesn't have to try to like see their face or, whatever. And I think that comes from a lot of what I've learned from making this type of work. And I think it's relevant to what you're saying is like, how is safety going to change? It's like, for me, it's all about clarity, transparency, and consideration of the totality of, can we find things that are clear, simple, and hit more than one goal? Like this example that I just gave,
Right. With whatever new safety regulations we have, it's just going to be a different formula or different practices that we have to ingrain into what you're already paying attention to.
And make them make sense. I think the detective show, the site-specific show that I think I mentioned to you, Lawrence, before, called The System, that
Yes.
has a whole element that is for an audience member who's in a situation, a one-on-one situation, one performer, one audience member, where it sort of traces an arc between, like, is this an interrogation? Is this a job interview? Is this a first date? Like, these are two people opposite each other. And it kind of construes the power dynamics of one person asking another person questions, and how many different scenarios that can be, especially where gender dynamics are involved, which is what the show is also about. It's a sort of LA noir for the end of patriarchy. And so that is a show. The entire show could be for one audience member and one performer with a sort of glass between them. That feels like the kind of thing that can come back soonish, maybe.
Yeah.
That people would feel safe. Because I've really been thinking about, what are people going to feel safe and excited to do? Because the other thing is, I think we know, again, like, uniquely, maybe as intimate, participatory, interactive, live artists, that people have to feel safe and enthusiastic in order to be ready to experience something.
100%. That's kind of baseline for the work you do. It's automatic.
Yeah.
So, do you have any sort of advice for the other creatives that are out there in the world, kind of stuck in this limbo land that we're in? Either just how to cope with their anxiety, or there's this underlying thing of, now's the time to be creative or to be productive or whatever. But, what you said earlier, take a lot of notes. Is there anything along those lines that you can offer to other creatives out there that are struggling?
Oh, man. I love them. I really, I'll say two things. I'll say a little bit about what my experience has been, and then maybe some quote unquote advice. I mean, I think, I listened to an interview with Rachel Chapkin, who's a friend and a great director. And she said, I never give advice because people's experiences are so different than mine. And I thought that was very so true, wise, that it's like, advice sort of presumes similarity. And I think that's another thing that's so important for us to be thinking about now, is we are all together, but we are all having very unique experiences, and that's always true, is like, it's so important to acknowledge what people are going through individually. And so saying, like, oh, my advice to you is, get up at 6 and do 4 hours of yoga. And you're like, there's a guy in our community, amazing artist, David Rosenberg, incredible experimental theater maker, he's an emergency anesthesiologist. That's his job.
Oh, wow.
So like, me and David Rosenberg are kind of similar in the sense that, like, we both make experimental theater for small audiences and are super interested in audio, but like, his life looks nothing like mine nowadays. He's married, he's got 2 young kids, and he's an emergency anesthesiologist, So that's one thing. That's one thing I'll say about advice, is I would like to say what has been working for me, and then I will say some things that I hope other people can do.
Okay.
So what's been working for me is, what's been working for me? What I've been noticing as things that I have been doing, I do have a bit of a structure. I have like 5 things that I try to exercise every day. I have like a little workout. I meditate. I read a poem, randomly chosen poem off of my. Part of what I've been doing is like really getting to know my personal belongings. And having like a very profound discourse with all of the things that I own. So I put all my poetry books, my books were all over the place. Half of them are in my studio where I am now. Half of them are upstairs in my living room. Some of them are in my bedroom, etc. I don't know where anything is. I buy 2 copies of stuff all the time just because I can't find it. So I put all the poetry in the bedroom, and that's where I do my meditation. And so I pull a book off the shelf and I read a poem before I do my meditation. I do some writing. Again, my writing is basically bad notes, haphazard, fragmented
Right.
notes about things that I'm noticing. I take a walk in my neighborhood every day, usually around dusk. And I kind of like, basically I decided that if I do all those things every day, then like, then I have a list of things that I've like crossed things off the list. And I think it's so important, like such an important part of my way of feeling, again, like I'm participating meaningfully in the world, or I can feel good about myself in a way, is like finding little ways to feel proud of ourselves is really important. And I think that, and feeling a sense of accomplishment and congratulation. Yeah. And I think that the public applause for the essential workers is a really good indication of how important it is to find ways to acknowledge, congratulate, and feel proud and grateful. I mean, that is like, and it's so relevant to our practice as theater makers that like immediately, spontaneously, the collective unconscious made a decision that it would applaud. It would do a physical, audio-based action of congratulation and admiration, acknowledgement of accomplishment. I think we need to do that for ourselves, you know, like find ways to feel like we're doing a good job, you know?
Right.
So I do those things like for my health. I think prioritize health is my advice, you know, whatever that means. So mental, spiritual, emotional, physical health, prioritize health, take bad notes.
I have random sticky notes all over the house, so I understand what I feel bad notes are.
I think,
and then I'll come across them and just be like, "What the hell is this?" Oh,
I think prioritize health, take bad notes, rest, congratulate yourself, congratulate each other, reflect. You know, so another thing I've been thinking, man, is just like I'm so grateful to be an artist and to have been able to participate in that way and make the work and share the work that I've been able to be part of. And I hope that I can continue to be that, you know. I just hope that there's a place for me in the conversation as this continues, because it's been so fun, you know.
Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Annie. It's been such a pleasure. Before you go, though, I mean, sometimes we ask people what they're looking forward to once they can go outside. But I think that maybe if you could answer what you hope comes out of this experience, maybe it's personally or for the industry or for society in general, that would be lovely.
I think it's been said by other people too, and it's been something I think that's been coming up. There's something emerging, I think, about acknowledgement of the connectedness and the care that we can offer ourselves and each other. I was very moved by this article in the New York Times about Gabrielle Hamilton about Prune. Did you guys read that about her restaurant?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that was very moving.
I read something earlier about the connection between hospitality and storytelling. And when I read Gabrielle Hamilton's piece, I was, just like touched to the core by the part where she talks about sitting alone in the empty restaurant and listening, which is exactly how we make site-specific work. You know, I mean, when I acquired this building, they said, what's first? And I said, first is me. I come in here and I sit here and listen to what the building wants, what the future might be, like what the walls are saying, all this stuff. And she was saying, you know, I sit in the empty room and I listen to the cooler and I listen to the fans come on and I listen to the creaking walls and I imagine what might come and I feel electricity in my body and sometimes I rearrange the tables. And I just thought, that's me. I'm her. We're the same. Absolutely. We're one. We're really one, you know, we're all in the hospitality business.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and it strikes me how connected that word is as well to the word hospital. Right?
Seriously.
And like we all hosting each other in some way. And I hope for that. I mean, it sounds kind of corny, but I hope for a kinder, more caring world that acknowledges the ways in which we're all connected, you know?
Yeah, I think we've strayed quite far from that. So I'm excited about the possibilities. All right.
Thank you so much for joining us, Annie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
It was great.
I was so honored to be asked, and I really appreciate it.
I love these interviews.
I do. I want things. I want that too. I want to be able to. It starts local. We just keep coming back to that, and how helping each other feels good. So losing that feeling, I don't want to lose that feeling. I want to keep doing it.
Right. Finding little ways to feel proud about yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Ourselves.
Listen, if you feed yourself, if you get out of the bed, if you, whatever the little accomplishment that you have, please feel good about yourself because you did it.
And it's okay to not understand what it all means or what it's all doing to you right now. I know everybody is like, I got to reinvent myself and come out of this, with a new me and all that. But it's impossible to really do that in that way. But being open, she's saying taking notes, take bad notes, being open and paying attention to what is happening, even just so much as her becoming more attuned to her personal belongings.
Yeah.
That reflects who you are, and it reminds you what is important to you. You bought that book of poems for a reason, and it's been sitting on the shelf and you haven't looked at it for 5 years because you've been so busy at work.
Yes.
And it's like reconnecting with who you are as a human and taking notes and being open to the shifts that are happening outside of you and inside of you. I think it's really lovely sentiment. So check out her work on flyhelo.com, who reps her for brand Experiential.
Yeah. Well, Lawrence, I'm sad to say that's it for today. The show
is the end of another show.
It sure is. The show is edited and co-produced by Rob Bloomkey.
Artwork and logo designed by Christopher Daniels.
And our unused but amazing music was composed by Kyle Pachia.
Yes, thanks for listening. We're off for the weekend, so we will be back on Monday. But until then, stay safe, stay connected, stay active, and please keep on staying home. We're not quite there yet.
We're not quite there yet. I know we all get ants in our pants. So if you do choose to go outside, wear a mask. And grab some gloves, too. You never know. Take out your phone right now and clean it. I know it's gross because you've had it on you, everything you've done today. Wash your hands and please don't touch your face.
And send us your stories or email us a voice recording to producershappyhour@gmail.com.
Lawrence, how can people reach you directly?
They can find me at lawrencetLewis.com for my producing work or voiceoflawrence.com for my voiceover work. Christian, how's your new website coming?
Almost done. I'm uploading a few videos. Oh, and I also heard that I'm not allowed to show a few things, so I had to take those down. So, I mean, everything we did before this year and the end of last year is fantastic, but it's all on hold because
makes sense.
Things aren't out yet, so it seems. But please check it out next week at sisterchristianproduces.com.
All right, everybody, have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.